Welcome back to Barn Find Aerospace. We're still working on this right wing, and there's still a lot of odd jobs left to do. When we say odd jobs, what are we talking about anyway?
Both of us know perfectly well what we are talking about, Mr. Bond. But I see that it is necessary to remind you. Odd job!
One of the odd jobs still left is installing these aileron cable pulleys. And that job has its own odd job, making these cable guards. Because the cable slipping out would mean no roll control, which makes flying a little awkward. Dad starts off measuring and marking for the bends and the holes. Using a punch like this makes a lot neater holes in sheet metal and drilling them. Pop's already had this punch when Dad was a little kid, so it's been in the barn at least 50 years. Same for this shear, and same for this belt sander. Then it's off to the bending brake to, make the bends. All the bolts holding flight controls get castle nuts and cotter pins because you don't want them coming loose and falling off either. Hose clamping this extra leg off the cable guard keeps the cable guard from turning around the wrong way. Airplanes are real picky about exactly what hardware you use. These oversized washers are there to hold this bell crank in place if the bearing was to fail. So now let's torque this castle nut down and put a pin in it. The aileron cable comes up from the wing strut and through the skin, so we need a hold for that. It's kind of tricky to undo a hole once you made it, so best double check the instructions. Yeah, I need a do-over. Let's mark it off again, only correctly this time. Just one more check before we start making holes. And here we go with the world's horriblest noise again. Then we clean up the holes with files and sandpaper. With the skin off and the wing upside down, you see the aileron cable comes in this way. But we need a pulley, because then we want the cable to hang a right turn. Reaching through the inspection holes to get a wrench on the other side and torque these bolts down is kind of a contortionist act. But we got her done eventually. Whenever we torque a bolt, we put this here orange goo on it. Lets us know it's been torqued for one thing, and when the goo's dry, it'll crack open if the nut ever comes loose. Another picky thing about aileron cables is when they might rub on something, they need a fair lead. Here's our fair lead housing design in CAD, and here's the cutout pattern we printed from it. Then it's off to the lathe to make the round parts. Next, we'll use the printed pattern to drill the holes in the flat parts and cut them out on the bandsaw. Then clean up the edges on the belt sander. Weld them together and shoot some primer on them, and you got your fair lead housings. All that just to be able to install a fair lead where the cable goes through here and takes a little bend. That's the thing, sometimes odd jobs have their own odd jobs.
Oh, you must excuse odd job, Mr. Bond.
The cable goes straight through this hole, so it just gets this grommet. Uncle Ray has real actual book learning for engineering, so when he said the best way to test all this would be with hay bale string, we figured he must know what he's talking about. So we busted out the binder twine and threaded it right on through. Looks like this should work. We will put some aviation grade steel cable in here before we actually fly the plane too far. So here we are in the virtual CAD barn where we drew up these fuel tank strap tensioner parts. The best way to make a bunch of holes on the edge of a rod like this and get them all the right place is to use a mill, like this one. It's a CNC mill, which means it runs on computer instructions. The awkward thing about Pop's mill is it runs on this ancient version of Windows. When we tried to convert our CAD model into a set of instructions this prehistoric computer could follow, we ran into some trouble.
Trouble at mill.
Oh no. What sort of trouble?
One on crossbeam's gone out askew on treadle.
For a simple job like this, just typing in the commands by hand turned out to be easier than getting different computers from different generations to talk to each other. This here's the center drill, which is just for getting the hole started. Then Dad types in the next command and we move on over to the next location. When we're done with the center drill, it's time to switch over to a regular drill bit. Then it's time for the end mill, which makes the flat spot around each hole. The thing about end mills is they're mean little razor-sharp cutting edges. After the last couple hundred mill safety incidents, you'd think Dad would have learned by now. You gotta be careful changing the chuck with these things. So now here's Dad with a big pink finger bandage cutting the mill piece into individual parts. Then it's off to the lathe to face off the ends and round over the sharp edges, 'cause we figure enough blood's been spilled on this job. And here's how these parts go together on the ends of the fuel tank straps. When you run the screws in, it cinches up the straps and holds the fuel tanks secure in place. We had to go A-visitin to make these here trailing edge stiffeners. They're 20 thousandths of an inch thick, which is easy to bend. But they're also 91 inches long, which isn't. So we paid a visit to this here red barn, where the metal wizard does his magic. There's been some real nice work come out of here, a lot more difficult than our job, so let's go on in. One thing you notice, most of the tools in here are 100 years old or even older, because metal wizardry is an art from a bygone age. Check out this turret punch. No need to change out the dies to get a different size hole. You look at a piece like this, knowing it was hammered into this shape from a flat sheet, and you can't see any hammer marks. Well, that's where the wizardry comes in. Notice how floppy these strips of sheet metal are? 20 thou is pretty flimsy. We're going to clamp it into the bending brake and put the first bend in it. You got to eyeball how far to go, so check it on the gauge. Looks like it needs a little more bend. Already just one bend and it's a lot less floppy. So we'll move on to the second bend and the third. Then do the other three to make 4 total of these parts. And back in our own barn, we try it out on our wing. Adding this second layer with the long bends to stiffen it up should keep this trailing edge from flopping around in the wind. This flat push rod gets held in place with a bolt this size. Doesn't seem like a great fit, so it's off to the lathe to turn out a bushing. As usual, we start off with a center drill, then a clearance drill for our size bolt. Next, we're going to turn the diameter down to fit inside the push rod. I remember being a kid and thinking this hand wheel turning all by itself was the height of technology. You can start off with bigger cuts, but if you make the last pass a thin cut, it leaves a lot nicer finish. That's a good snug fit, so let's part it off. And now we got everything fitting together just right. Now we got all those odd jobs done, we get to bolt the stuff together. Reamer makes sure the bolts go in smooth, and here's that goo that keeps dissimilar metals from feuding. This bracket holds the flap torque tube and gives us another aileron cable fair lead. But we got a fit problem, so we're going to have to open this up with some more horrible noises. Now it fits, so we can go ahead and bolt that sucker on in. And here's mechanical daughter bolting the flap hinges on. And this here's the flap actuation mechanism with the push rod we made a spacer for. There's 2 of these springs to hold the flaps up when you aren't using them, but we're just using one spring to show how it works, because with both springs in, it gets a little stubborn. We've still got a few more odd jobs left on this wing, but pretty soon it'll be time to get to working on t'othern. We hope it won't be too long, and we hope y'all be back when we do.